connected with another.
The communications. Yeah.
All right. Then I have it.
So let's see here. Okay. Oh, and then Happy is texting me that Wendy needs to let me on as a panelist.
Okay, I will do that in just a moment. We are now live on YouTube, and if you're ready, I'm going to start recording.
Okay.
Okay. We're good to go.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to, we have two board members who will be joining us shortly, but I would like to call this meeting of the Madison Public Schools Board of Education regular meeting to order. It is about 7:34 by my clock. Hi, Happy. All right, if we could all please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Next on our agenda is the public participation. And at this time, I'd like to ask Emily, our secretary, to lay down the guidelines. And if there's anybody in the audience who would like to speak, you'll have a chance.
Thank you, Galen. The board welcomes and appreciates comments from the public via email to board members, via the Contact the Board page on the district website, or via public comment at meetings. In advance of tonight's meeting, we did receive 3 communications from community members. All of these emails are shared with the entire board as well as the administration. I'll briefly report on the messages we received in advance of this meeting, and then I will open it up to public comment. We did receive 2 emails from community members asking about end of year graduation plans and other celebrations, hoping for some of those traditions to return as much as normal as we approach the end of the school year. We also did receive an email from a parent concerned about school safety, and we did receive an email asking about the guidance for quarantine. Those were the emails that we received from the public, and then I will open it up to public comment. As I mentioned, we do welcome public comment at our meetings. We ask that when you speak, you please state your name and your address. We request that comments are limited to 3 minutes in order to ensure that all interested parties have an opportunity to speak. I will be keeping track of the time and letting you know. Please speak on one topic per public comment session. Please do not identify individual staff members or students by name. We're happy to hear from our community, but at a business meeting, it should not be expected that the board will respond. We'll do our best, however, to follow up and contact you after the meeting if you prefer. So if you'd like to have your comments read, please let us know. So you can go ahead and raise your hand, and Wendy will call on you for any members of the public who would like to speak at this time.
Emily, we actually have no members of the public in attendance right now.
Okay, we'll have another opportunity later if anyone joins us. Thanks, Wendy.
You're welcome.
Great. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Emily. Next up is our Board of Education Student Representative Report. And I see Eric and Isabel. Isabel, how about if you lead off today?
Sure. So we had the school day SAT a few, like 2-ish weeks ago, something like that. It's all blurring together. And in a few more weeks, all the juniors will take the NGSS, the Next Generation Science Standards. I'm just thrilled because I love standardized tests so much that I can't wait for another one. But oh well, it's good. It's for a good cause. So it's going to happen with the same schedule as the school day SAT, which worked really fluidly. So we had the other grades stay home and do an asynchronous remote learning day, which everybody else said they loved. I wouldn't now. And we went in the morning. It was super easy. They divided us up by cohort, and you went into like different parts of the building, so the cohorts didn't come into contact, but that was when we were still split up, so I guess it'll be a little different now. And then there's an exciting announcement about junior prom coming Friday. We don't know what it is yet. There's just gonna be something. Gonna be something big. I have hope. And then other news, contact tracing. Things are changing up. After April break, the quarantine will become 10 days, and if I'm correct, no days if you're fully vaccinated. Mr. Cook can check me on that if I'm wrong. But that sounds exciting, because a lot of my classes are quarantined right now, which gets to the second part. Full in means lots of kids quarantined. My chemistry class is down to 3 stragglers. Everybody else is home. So I think we're kind of getting, it's like one by one, we all fall down, but we're staying enthusiastic. We're hoping to get through to April break. I think Eric has some other stuff to share.
Yeah, some paralleling news to how the junior prom is being announced. On Friday, the senior class will also be meeting, and we will be hearing about not just proms, but all new senior end of the year related, announcing the dates for everything. And I believe that they're going to be announcing the different events that we're going to be able to continue a lot of our traditions that we've had in the past, which is great. Also, spring sports, they have now started. They're mostly practicing right now, but on Saturday we will have the beginning of competitions. Outdoor sports are allowed 2 spectators per player, which is a lot better than during the hockey season in indoor sports, where they were a lot of times not allowing parents. So it's great that you're now able to have a lot of people come to games. Also, the school's working on a way to have a real freshman orientation next year. I mean, well, for this year, for the next year's freshmen. Last year, they were not able to have one because of everything that happened. So it's great that we're going to be able to incorporate the incoming freshmen and have them kind of be introduced to the school, similar to how I did and how Isabel did. And that's great that they're going to have that chance to be able to visit the school. And that is all that we have for this week.
Okay, thank you both. If there are questions or comments or things people would like to follow up on, the floor is open. All right. Thank you very much. Hearing none, let's move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Craig Cook.
Yes, thank you, Isabel and Eric. Isabel, don't leave just yet. You are correct in that students that are fully vaccinated, students or staff that are fully vaccinated, meaning 2 weeks after their Pfizer or Moderna second shot, or 1 week or 2 weeks after their 1 shot of Johnson & Johnson, would not need to quarantine. Students 16 to 18 would only be able to receive the Pfizer vaccine at this point. And so that's something to be aware of. But yes, we're hoping to get to that point with more of our students eventually as well. And along those lines, we had our first second shot clinic last week, and very successful, over 200 vaccinations given out. And we will have our second and final vaccination clinic this coming Thursday. And so as Isabel shared, Friday is a distance learning day for the entire district, in anticipation of some illnesses coming out of that second vaccination. And so we're moving forward with that, and it is good news in terms of travel for April break. We've shared this in the last few updates. We'll share it again, of course, this Thursday or Friday when that message goes out, that you were asking any families or students that are traveling to follow the travel advisory and do test coming back, but it's not a requirement for them to return. We've had students and staff do a great job at at Daniel Hand with school being fully open, but there have been some cases, just that we were addressing on Monday, and so that has been difficult. But the students and staff have been great working through that, and the administration has done an excellent job with that. And as mentioned, we were moving to a 10-day quarantine period after break, and that was been planned for several weeks and been shared out, and that is consistent with what we're seeing other towns in the shoreline area follow. We've talked to the health department numerous times on that, and we feel that will be able to be implemented and bring students and staff that have to be quarantined back sooner. So we're pleased to make that change. Another change along those lines that we're making after break is the desk shields that I think have been helpful, but I think they've run their course. Certainly in CDC has shared that they no longer have that recommendation for the desk shields. That's for our younger students. But we will continue to use them for mass breaks, for snack time, and for lunchtime if they're eating within the classroom. And so we'll still have them close by, but I think that our teachers are very excited. They've been asking for a little while now to be able to take those down, because it is a distraction to learning, and students are constantly kind of trying to look around and underneath. And so I think that will increase their experience in learning at school. Right now we have 11% of the district in full remote, about 18% at hand. We have heard from some families that they have plans, so they are going in full remote this week, just to make sure their plans aren't impacted by any quarantine. In terms of the building project, I'm excited that we have Mike Zuba with us tonight. I'll introduce him in just a minute, but I just wanted to share with the board and the public, we have met with the State Building Commission this past week, and providing them with updated information. I'll share that with the board, and we'll place that on the website. They asked for some documents from us, and I just today received draft educational specs. I will also share that with the board, and look forward to presenting that at a meeting of the board in the coming future. And then I would share with Eric and Isabel, I think the announcement on Friday, they would not put that out there as an exciting announcement if they didn't have some good news to share, or at least I hope they wouldn't. So I think that will be, some just updated information, and then we'll continue to follow state guidelines. We expect that the governor will eventually weigh in on graduation and in proms, and that will allow us to take a good look at what we can do. I know we're holding dates, and that's exciting. And so we're hoping for a really great and fun spring for our students when we come back after next week's break. So I'll stop there, but I'll ask Wendy to move Mike Zuba from SLR Consulting over to present to the board. If there's any questions on what I shared to date. All right, so we are very fortunate. Mike is actually a parent in town, so he has some inside information on Madison, and I think you'll see that through his report. When I shared the enrollment report with the board, they felt this was important to bring forward to the public, because it is some really update and exciting information, and Mike has a large report that the board received, but I've asked him to pare that down considerably for tonight, and then really be open for questions. So without further ado, Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, thanks, Craig. And I pared down about 50 slides down to 20, and hopefully we could touch on the highlights and leave plenty of time for any Q&A. If I could share my screen, I can get right into the meat and potatoes of our presentation for this evening. So I've been doing enrollment projections and land use planning in Connecticut for about 20 years. This is my first go around doing it during a pandemic, but a lot of the data that we're seeing across a lot of our other clients throughout Connecticut, and we've done 12.5 enrollment projections since the pandemic hit in the state, as well as and some other states, gave us a lot of good insight in how best to be able to look at the information, project going forward, and ask the right questions. And everybody in the public schools in Madison have been very helpful in getting us a lot of that information. So starting really at the building blocks, we go through a pretty comprehensive process of collecting town birds, collecting land use records, purchasing MLS data to be able to look at the housing market, housing sales, not only from a town-wide standpoint, but also a geographic standpoint, and that helps feed in the elementary school projections as well as inform the size of the school as working with Craig and others as part of the building project. And ultimately go through and create a set of 10-year projections that can not only serve for your annual planning over the next few years, but also to be able to use as part of the school construction grant process. So really getting into what I'll call the enrollment drivers. One of the big things in a community like Madison is the home sales and the home sale market. What we saw in 2020 was a dramatic uptick overall in the number of single family sales. And this is shown in the stacked bar chart with condos shown in the mustard color and the lighter blue color showing single family. So 2020 ended the year at just under 300 single family home sales. Tracking back throughout history, Madison wasn't at that same level of home sales probably about 14, 15 years ago, going back to 2004, 2005. Of note, 2019 was a bit of a down year. We have seen that across some of our other district communities as well. But clearly, you know, what we've all been hearing that of the push and the number of signs everyone sees around town has really bore out within the numbers themselves. And then that was a big driver for some of the enrollment data that we looked at, looking at new students to the district. So when we're tracking home sales, we're also looking at home sale price, as those that are in the real estate market know, as the supply becomes constrained, price goes up, the total numbers of sales go down, but it's still a good, healthy metric to look at when we're talking about student generation. So as other individuals in town that may not have children turn their homes over, younger families move in. We also see some home sales between families with school-age children. But by and large, with the total number of sales on an uptick, we're also seeing the prices on an uptick. For 2020, it ended the year at just over $470,000 for the median sale price. That's an appreciable uptick from where it's been and hasn't seen levels of sale price at that level since before the Great Recession. Tracking through conversations with local realtors during 2021, the market is equally tight right now. These are key variables that we have to account for going forward and make some assumptions on what the likely market's going to look like over the next 2 to 5 years and how that's going to drive enrollment over the next 10 years. So when we begin looking at it from a geographic basis, we geocode all of our housing sales that we purchase, and we're able then to sort of look at clusters of sales and relate those clusters of sales to some other demographics, including students new to the district. But it was pretty clear to us a lot of the typically established neighborhoods have seen, those hotter areas. So down around Neck Road as well as south of Route 1, and then really over on Green Hill Road, right in the middle of town, and then just south of the Circle. Those subdivisions along Opening Hill Road all have had elevated single-family home sale activity. Taking a look at how that relates to new students to the district. So what we do is we have the public school information system, so the student database, the PSIS, from October 1st of every year, and we address match that in our geographic information system in order then to be able to identify students that, based on ID, weren't Madison Public School students in the year before, so presumably new students to the district, and look at how that relates to the hotspot. So, compared to the hotspot on the previous map, we're seeing a lot of similarities within the new student hotspot map, where that then allows us to, be able to make that comparison that a lot of those single family sales that we've been seeing are resulting in new students to Madison Public Schools, and that all factors into part of our enrollment projection equation, which is the immigration of new students into the district. One of the other key variables we want to look at, and these are ones that aren't generating students now, so that we're not seeing in the current student enrollment or even in next year's enrollment, but coming down the line, we have conversations with the town planning and zoning officials through the town planning department and get an understanding of what's recently planned, what's under construction, as well as what's either proposed or in that approval phase. And we're looking for really housing types that are going to generate school-age children when we're doing this type of enrollment projection work. So over the last several years, Madison averaged 16 units annually. There's been a bigger push of units over the last 18 months or so, but many of those are either condos or 1 or 2 bedroom apartments, not typical styles that would generate a large number of school-age children into the system. We did note that Markham Place over off of Horse Pond Road has 16 single-family units coming online. If you've driven by, you can kind of look off to the side and see the construction there. That will be one that will generate school-age children going forward. So this is just information that we track. And if we're seeing such an elevated level of activity that doesn't match what was in the recent past, that's when we're able to make adjustments to our enrollment projection model to account for those future developments. This is just a look back over the last 13 or actually 12 years of the enrollment history. And we always use, as part of our cohort survival, we use the enrollment history as part of a basis to sort of build what the future is going to look like, and then take into account all of those other factors, the demographics, the housing, the economy, the housing starts, and make adjustments to the model. I think one of the things that jumped out to me beside the fact that the enrollment has been declining, it was looking at the lower elementary schools. So looking at K-3 and seeing some really good stability there over 3 years, going from really 16, 17 through 19, 20, and then seeing the 2021 number, and then realizing that if there weren't the impacts of the pandemic, that number would have likely been flat, if not slightly elevated. So as you know, we look at sort of going trough to trough or peak to peak, and enrollment decline doesn't happen forever. In our experience, we see where a district eventually flattens out troughs and slowly begins climbing as the class sizes equalize each other and the incoming kindergarten classes start to get larger than the outgoing high school classes. So as we rolled up our sleeves, and this was something that we really didn't dig into at a tremendous level of detail in the past, opt-outs, but doing enrollment projections during a pandemic, it began to be part of the line of questions that we would ask of, you know, what students were registered, you know, prior to the start of the school year and may not have attended school there, and for what reason if you do track it. So going back over the last 5 years of history, we identified 2 categories: those transferring to homeschooling, as well as those transferring to parochial or private religious schools. And we noticed that there was a large uptick in the current year due to the pandemic. And then when we drilled down a little bit further, we saw that it was largely in the elementary schools and really largely in those younger grades. So knowing that those were likely choices made due to the pandemic, we realized we needed to be able to make some assumptions and some overrides in our projection models to be able to capture those students going forward, should they return once the pandemic conditions begin to wane and we start getting back to somewhat normal. So this is just our general assumption slide on our enrollment projections. This covers really everything for budget planning as well as space planning purposes. We're assuming pre-K enrollment will return to historic levels of about 45 students over at TCLC. We're also assuming that 75% of this year's homeschool withdrawals will return to Madison next year. And then 50% of those private parochial withdrawals that have occurred this year will also return at that the next year's grade level. And then we made some assumptions on kindergarten based on some of those opt-outs as well. It's something that we're seeing across many districts where we're having much lower kindergarten numbers. I believe Durg B across the board was about 6% or 5 or 6% lower than what was anticipated. So we want to ensure that we have an accurate number for next year. So we made some assumptions there on getting K returning, likely a number of delayed entrants or slightly older kindergartners coming into the system due to the pandemic. We're also noting that the recent pace of home construction will continue. We have not added multipliers into our projections. The single family activity just isn't at a level that would warrant that. And something that we've been doing over the last 8 years, even pre-pandemic, where we look at our variables of birth to K. So that's the relationship of births 5 years ago to K this year. We use a variable birth to K because we're seeing larger numbers of families with 0 to 4, 0 to 5-year-olds in tow buying homes, which just if you use the static birth to kindergarten ratio, you would not account for. So that's capturing really those young families as they're moving into communities with young children that aren't yet school age. So I think one of the things that I've never seen before in all my years of doing enrollment projections and analyzing demographics was looking at this year's birth class that fed into the kindergarten class, which is tracking upwards here, 94 births as reported by Madison mothers or mothers with a Madison home address. I mean, we had 3 straight years in a row of actual births reported of the exact same number at 94, which was quite interesting. And that's looking at some, if we didn't have a pandemic, level of stability within that birth cohort moving into kindergarten, but also with the elevated home sales, we're seeing that birth cohort kind of grow into a larger number of kindergartners moving forward. What also jumped out at me was just the reported births for the last 3 years, where we could see this is a marked uptick. The greatest number of births reported in town over the last several years at 17 in 2018, 15 and 19, and then really a big spike in 2020. If we had census data, which we do not because they are a bit behind on the 2020 census for reporting that information out, we would normally have cohort level data for females of childbearing age where we can do a demographic projections for births. But with the federal government being a bit behind, we just did a simple mathematical model of pushing births out further. And we have a high model shown in red, a medium model, and then a low model. And each of those feed in to our district-wide projection. So we've prepared a low, medium, and high pre-K-12 projection overall. We started doing low, medium, and high enrollment projections right around the time of the Great Recession because that was one of those unforeseen events that did have a long-lasting impact. Hopefully, the pandemic, being unforeseen doesn't have as long of a lasting impact, but this allows us to be able to prepare really good projections going out 10 years. That the last 5 years are always a bit assumption-driven because we don't have actual data. But especially considering where you're at with planning for school facilities, we looked at being able to use that medium model as our most likely, but also just saying that the housing market really bears watching. And if this elevated market continues for the next 2 or so years, you may want to be looking at this mustard color line of the 2785 overall for 10 years as the more likely trajectory should this elevated market continue. But for right now, we'll just speak to the medium model where, all 3 models are in really good agreement for the first 2 years. It's where the assumptions take over a little bit is where we get that separation overall. But I think it's clear when we look at the data that Madison is right at the bottom of the trough of the enrollment with, the model showing flattening and then showing an uptick, even with the lower model showing a very slow flattening. And that would assume a longer prolonged recovery as well as a downturn in the housing market. So looking at our first grade grouping, really the K-3, you could see it was fairly flat until this year. We're projecting that rebound to come with a much larger kindergarten class. I believe it's going to be about 165 for 21-22, and then really a slow uptick reaching to about 720 students across both buildings going out 10 years. Looking at the individual school projections for Jeffrey and Ryerson, we're seeing Jeffrey having a bit more growth there. That's due to some elevated activity there from the housing market, as well as the enrollment within the building itself. But in the first 5 years going out to 25, 26, we're seeing Jeffrey's enrollment climb to 385 and Ryerson climb slightly to 316. And then Jeffrey begins to stabilize out to just under 400 over the last 5 years of the projection. And Ryerson climbs to the mid 320s and stabilizes there as well. So really the first 5 years, and it's really in part driven by that uptick in births that we know are coming, are going to really push enrollment over the first 5 years of our projection horizon. Now looking at the 4-5 grouping at Brown, we're seeing stable enrollment there overall. If you were to draw a line from really 14-15 back and then go forward to 2030, really good recovery there where enrollment climbs through the 330s and ultimately returns to that 2014, 2015 level at 400 or just under 400 students at the back half of the 10 years. Going into Polson, we're seeing that continued decline a little bit longer. So as students matriculate through the system, you're always replacing, when you're in a decline, you're replacing some larger grades that graduate and move up into the high school with some smaller grades, grade cohorts that are moving in. So we're seeing the enrollment decline for really the first 5 years, then rebound and then climb back up to a point of just under 600 students by 29-30 at 30-31. The decline gets pushed a little further ahead as those students slowly matriculate through the high school. So, we see that further decline at hand. Enrollment drops down to 710 or so students. That's the bottom in 27-28, and then slowly rebounds to just over 760 students in 2030. So really the last 4 years of our projection horizon are where the high school enrollment actually starts to experience a bit of a rebound after a number of years of decline. So as part of the information to provide for the OSC GNR and to inform the ed specs as well as everything for the proposed building project, we wanted to be able to divide the enrollment up evenly between the town. We've created this sort of North Elementary and South Elementary School with the elementary enrollment, the K-5, divided fairly evenly between them. We know that if, in order to achieve this enrollment balance, you would have to go through a little bit of a redistricting from where the boundaries are today to have both schools at about 560, and then the South Elementary, including the 45 pre-K from the TCLC, would actually be just over 600. So we're looking at that 8 to 10 year window, and the state requires a 8-year projection. So you do have an extra year or two of planning depending on when you get that application in. But it's looking overall at the back half. Both schools could support about 560 K-5 enrollment there. And should the enrollment pivot to the higher number due to some increased housing sales continue for the long term, we've provided a second set as well to be able to compare against and understand what the space needs would be for that as part of the construction grant process. And then finally, I'll just end on just the detailed table. This really provides the median projections by grade for each of the grade groupings going forward over the next 10 years. And that really ends my my summary of our enrollment work. I'm happy to take any questions from the board at this time.
Good question. Hi. So for the kids who enrolled in private and parochial school this year, your estimate of 50% coming back, is that based on kids who have already come back? Because the contracts at those schools have been due. So pretty much the parents who are there are knowing whether or not they're re-enrolling their kids or they're bringing them back to the district.
Yeah, we didn't have any reports back from any of the parochial schools on their contract. It was just an assumption that we thought was a decent assumption to make, knowing that the jump to the school was a bit of out of the norm for what historically happened. So we thought it would be a good way to split the difference without having any of the specific family by family contract or the school data.
Our two principals have been calling, and I think Mike's numbers are pretty spot on in terms of what they're hearing from families. Not all families have given us an indication of their return or if they've made a decision yet, but it's pretty, I think it's going to play out pretty close to that, if not a little higher.
Yeah, and I also will say too, all of our projections follow the state's guidelines. So they're based on that point in time of October 1st, where they kind of freeze the enrollment, it becomes the official. And I do know from hearing from others in town and teachers that there are some new students coming into town and showing up, and all of that movement that's happening because we're in a little bit of a different place than we were say back in August, aren't really captured in this number, but they will be captured in next year's numbers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
So,
Right, Greg.
Oh, go ahead, Galen. I was gonna just move us forward. Go ahead.
I was just going to jump in with one thing, and it might be connected to the next part, Craig. So feel free to put a pause on this. But it looks like based on these numbers, we can expect somewhere between 8 and 10 classes per grade across both schools over the timeline. Again with the median projection, so maybe a little higher. So I guess maybe the obvious question: how does that look with the building project?
Yeah, I think we're right on. I mean, we had looked at a building that was to house about 600 students, and so when you look at converting Brown, Brown would still be the larger of the two elementary schools with some additional space for a gym and an auditorium and in a little bit larger classes than I think that would be in the new building. So I think we're right on it. I mean, I think if we get into the high projections and those continue on for a while, we could potentially have to, look at expanding, but that's a far way out, and the state will not allow us, as Mike said, to go beyond 8 years in terms of our projections. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Zuba. We appreciate that. Mike, when needed, has been on our weekly call team to provide some information. Has been very helpful, and so we thank him tremendously for his local knowledge and sharing that with us.
Happy to help everybody. Have a good night.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael.
Take care.
At this point, Wendy, could you please let Katie Stein in as a panelist?
And Wendy, if you could also add Stacy to the.
All
All
right.
set.
Oh, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Cook, back to you.
Thank you. So thanks to the board. I know that was of interest of you when we received that report, and hopefully that was time well spent and a little bit easier to digest than the larger report that we received. Our next item and last under my report was for the budget. So as you know, we have $100,000 reduction to address, and we had already had some discussions around this area. So Stacy's joining us, and I'll ask Stacy to put up the proposed reductions from the administration. Okay, so go ahead. Stacy, I'll let you address. That'd be better, actually. Thank you.
Okay, I brought up the same schedule that we worked on during the workshops, and these highlighted items equate to the $100,000 reduction. So I can walk you all through it. The first one was a reduction in the building-based subs, which came to about $49,000. The next reduction was a Madison Intervention Academy, which came to $30,000. And then finally, the interactive boards reduction of $21,000, which we will take all of these funds, and I'm sure Dr. Cook, you're about to say this, out of the grant monies, but which would equate to $100,000 out of the grant monies. But because it was a lease program, $21,000. So the sum of these three items comes to $100,000, which was a request from the Board of Finance, which brings down the final Board of Ed budget to the $59,272,037, or 1.23%.
Any questions on that? We can also show you how that impacts the the grants, as you know, we're still in the early stages of that process. Gail has been working on the grant application, and we're meeting with a state consultant tomorrow to get their input and see. And we just received information on the Sr3 grant, which will is the larger of the two that we are dealing with now. Stacy, could you put up the grant
Yes.
piece? I think it's important to see these both at the same time in order to know the impact of what we're doing. And again, this is a draft for the grant. It has changed since the last time you saw that. I think we're in part reacting to the board's concerns, some concerns we heard from the board on this, as well as our ongoing discussion with administration. So the first things I wanted to point out is that you'll see the substitutes are added. You'll see that the interactive boards come in at $100,000. The reason for that is that $21,000 reduction is really over the course of 5 years, because it was a lease program. And so putting the money up front, there's less lease costs, so that the 21 actually does equal 100,000 for the 5 years. And then as well, that the intervention academy would not occur, so that $30,000 is not represented here per se, but the interventionists at Jeffrey and Ryerson we feel are a better model. We spoke to that last time. We took out 2 FTEs. I know there was a concern about the number of FTEs that would be impacted. And we do have 2 additional classroom teachers, one for Jeffrey, one for Ryerson, based on a large part to that enrollment discussion we just happened, but more about the students, that were homeschooled or not in our system right now that are coming in. That in a lot of ways is addressing a budget need that we would have had regardless. So if we didn't receive these 2 grants, we would have had to find money for those 2 teachers or approach the town for that funding. That piece is there. The piece for the extra class sections related to classroom sizes, course offerings, is related to the additional classroom teachers and then also increased enrollment. And so as you can imagine, when we're right at this year the almost maximum that our art, music, PE teachers were teaching. And so as we've added just that one additional classroom, and the need to provide specials to those have pushed those up 0.1 for pretty much all those cases, as well as an art class at the high school that is being reduced, but we were bringing it back under this proposal, which is allowable under the grant. So that's where those extra sections come in. And the other change is, as we talked to our administrative team, there was full support for increasing ESS at Polson for 2 years. We do see an increased need. The program is maxed out at this point, and we're expecting additional social emotional needs there, when we return in the fall as well. In a lot of ways, we view this as an investment, in that if we're able to keep students in Madison, that $110,000, certainly reflects, less than one student, potentially leaving our district. That additional ESS would service 9 additional students for next year, up to 9 additional students for next year. So we felt that was a good use of the grant fund. So again, that also reduced the putting money towards that, and the reductions reduced the FTE count to a total of 6, 2 of which would only be in place for 1 year. And so we'd have 4 going forward to year 2 and 3.
I'm sorry, can you clarify that, the FTEs, about which ones are which? I'm not quite understanding.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, I'm going through that fast. If you look at the top of the chart, 2 of the FTEs, elementary at Jeffrey and Ryerson, that would be for 1 year, paid for out of the grant. And so that would be 2 of the FTEs. And then if you go to the middle piece where it addresses the social worker, so there's 2 social workers, 2 interventionists, that would be 4 FTEs for a total of 6 out of the 2 grants. So $1.27 million. There'd be 6 FTEs, for the first year, and then 4 for year 2, 4 for year 3. So it would spread out that impact of potential layoffs or additional positions needing to be added through a budget process.
When you say 2 or 3 year, you just mean that's what you're using the grant for. You're not saying that these positions are 2 or 3 years and then they're terminated.
They're all 1 year, certainly when they start. And our proposal at this point would be to pay for them for 3 years out of the grant. We could find out that we could reduce one of the interventionists after year 2, and then we inform the board, come back to the board and talk about the other uses of that grant funding. I can't imagine that the grant is going to be so stringent that we're not able to adjust almost on a year-by-year basis. That's what we're hearing is the intent that your needs may change and you might need to adjust. We may find out that math at Brown is more of a need 2 years from now, so we'd adjust based on that.
My question then is not just about the grant paying for them, but once they're in the system and they are an employee of the Madison Public School District, then they'll join the union and they'll be part of the budget.
Correct. So they won't be. These would be paid for out of the grant, but for this year and as you know later on in the agenda we have non-renewals. So we have gone through that process at hand for the last 5 or 6 years, and in most cases we're able to maintain their job by the retirement of a colleague or a resignation of a colleague. And so that would be our hope, certainly a year from now for those 2 classroom teachers. You could see retirements or resignations or leaves where if those teachers come in and they're doing an excellent job, that we would keep them on board. But there are times where you're not able to do it, and then you would have to go through a non-renewal process like we are doing tonight. If we're not able to guarantee the job by May 1st for them for the following year, you non-renew and you would go through that process and help them get a job in another district that is something that might happen. But we'd hope to keep them in Madison if we can.
So I guess a question that I have is, can you actually, if we look at this as the pandemic has greatly affected the learning, and that's why we need these interventionists, then what we're looking at, hopefully, is a short-term problem. And so then I would think that we could look at it as a solution that is also shorter term. I don't think that we should be looking at this as we're always going to need these added interventionists, because hopefully this pandemic is going away or getting more under control. So we want to catch these students up. We want to get everyone up to speed. And then I would think that there would be less of a need for as many interventionists in the district. So is there a way then to contract them for a shorter time rather than bringing them in as the usual hire, join the union, and they stay forever?
So I agree with your first point in the the rationale for the question. Our hope is, I think we'll always have a need for interventionists, but if we do this right over the course of 3 years, then we will have addressed students that are not even in pre-K yet, or some that were in pre-K that certainly had some losses in that area, or were in kindergarten for us, and have that support throughout. But a teacher's contract, as a non-tenured teacher's contract especially, is for 1 year. And so we basically, they would have to be part of the union because they are certified employees, and they're in a teacher's union position, but they're on a 1 year contract each year, and it's a continuing contract unless it's non-renewed by the board. So like we'll take that action tonight If you don't take that action, the contracts continue on. When they receive tenure, they certainly have different rights, but most likely the teachers we would hire under these proposals for the classroom teachers would be brand new. Teachers would not have tenure, and they would come in under a 1-year contract. And a year from now, we'd be making a decision on how things look.
And I'm not really understanding the extra special sections related to classroom sizes, course offerings. Is that a salaried amount? I don't really get what that is.
It's additional FTE that fluctuates each year because we have so many part-time specialists at the elementary level. So the principals do an excellent job of really looking at how many sections of PE, art, music that they need to offer. And so they had to adjust them up because of the additional classes, classrooms within the school. So we add to those teachers, and then again, a year from now, we may have to subtract or add if there was additional classrooms.
So those are additional hours to the current teachers that are teaching those special classes, and it's not new teachers added in? Or would we need new? Because I know some of the specials teachers are shared. And so
Right.
if you add more classes, can they be in 2 places at once?
These would be all adding because we have several that are 0.7 or 0.8. And so 0.8, 0.2 reflects really a day a week. So 0.8 is 4 days. So if we went from 0.8 to 0.9, that person would work another half day each week.
I have a question. How was it determined that social workers were more beneficial than psychologists?
So what we looked at with the principals was the direct service hours in social work, and then the programming for social emotional learning. So what we would like to do under this scenario where we have a social worker in each building is have a district social emotional learning program, and they would present lessons to students on that, within the classroom or within groups.
Are you aware that psychologists can do that as well,
Yes.
in addition to comprehensive psych assessments? I mean, their training is pretty broad.
Yes.
I would express the desire for a school psychologist over a social worker.
One piece that was not part of our discussion, but I would caution that it is oftentimes harder, as you probably know, to find a school psychologist than social workers. I know a lot of the districts around us are looking for both, but that would be something I would just caution us if we went in that direction. It may be harder to find two.
Could we leave it as a generic open position, or does it have to be defined as only a social worker?
I'm willing to go back and have that discussion with the principals, but I believe what they will look at based on what they had identified as the need specifically was a social worker to be able to provide social work hours to students.
Okay, I just want to advocate for the psychologist who's just as equally trained, if not trained beyond that. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
How many social workers do we currently have in district?
We have, this would give us one per building. So we have it, I know Liz is on, but I believe we have 4 with TCLC right now, so we'd go to 6.
So, and that does not include the ESS program at Pulse in her hand. That's an
Correct.
addition, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then what would be the budget impact for 6 FTE, possibly 7, depending on what you did with the specials teachers, for the benefits for all of these? Because that would hit our underlying budget. So I think it would raise our budget past the 1.23% that we just saw.
So the way we have budgeted in here, which is very common with other districts, especially being self-insured, is we're we're budgeting for benefits as predicted by our consultants. And so we have not, for instance, this year we are going down FTEs. As of right now, we have not decreased that amount. So the board has traditionally budgeted the teachers' salaries, and then the following year, any impact from, from that based on self-insurance would be either increased, or this year it was actually decreased in the budget. That's more, obviously that's much more rare than that, because we are self-insured. There, you could have, one employee, one head count, have a very significant cost, and then you could have 10, new employees that may not have much of an impact at all, especially with an HSA, because they're paying for the first amount. But the insurance has been trending very, very well, and as I said, we were going down FTE this year, and we hadn't decreased the amount based on that.
Dr. Cook, I thank you for all of this, and I know we've heard a lot about budget and things like that. I'm more concerned about whether or not we're addressing all of the needs that our students might have in the coming year. And I know that the Institute over the summer, we discussed as being hard to staff and not knowing whether or not kids would potentially attend. However, just talking to other districts and learning from other districts and what they're doing, I'm concerned that we might not be having enough of an opportunity for kids who may be seeking, to fill in some gaps and things like that over the summer months, and wondered if there was any potential for that to happen in the summer.
Yes, thank you. So Gail had actually done some research on that in anticipation of us looking at the summer programming at this point. And so the program that we had one of the options that we had laid out to the board was to run a regular ed program concurrent with our special ed program. It did not appear that we'd be able to staff that, given staff that right now we're indicating that they would be willing to work. And I know last year we were barely able to staff the special ed program on its own. So that's pretty consistent, I think, with what we've seen and what we've heard. We do believe we would have been able to staff the program just prior to the school year, because Gail gave them the options, and so it looked like that would be a program we could staff. But again, I think we all felt that the interventionist would be more impactful given the course of a full year, and that the cost of that program was $30,000. And so then when we had a chance to address it with more grant funds, we felt we would do that better. I think we would keep that open as an option. If the board were interested in that, we need to identify $30,000 to hold that program.
Thank you.
Can I ask, well, first of all, let me say I'm glad that a lot of the things that had to be cut out of this year's budget are maintained here. I know that's these are things that were important to the district and important to the board in terms of the way that we voted. So I'm glad that the administration was able to maintain those. Just two things. One, I agree with Violet. I have a hard time understanding, and I'd love to hear more about it. I know you're going to talk to the team about it, Craig. Why, if social emotional needs are increasing and the need for programming is increasing, which all makes sense, why there wouldn't be a corresponding increase in testing and screening needed for those situations for individual students. So, maybe one possibility is one FTE social worker and a one FTE psychologist to at least balance that out. It just seems strange, but there may be staffing needs or staffing that already exists that I'm not aware of that might help to cover that. That would be a point of interest I'd like to hear more about at some point. The other is, I'm still concerned that there's none of the funding is allocated to professional development, professional learning, other training, and things of that nature. I still think that that's a twin concern along with staffing, right? So that if there are a lot of things that need to be made up, especially for the elementary grades, for kids, both academically, social, emotional, et cetera, that those are best served both by staffing and additional professional development. So I once again advocate for that.
Thank you. Wendy, could you ask Liz, or could you have Liz join us for, maybe she can address the school psych colleges first, social work and that kind of thought. And I do know for the for professional development piece, you know, I know that one of the items that we're seeing a positive variance in our accounts is professional development. So I don't think that there's anything that would preclude us from, you know, going in that direction at the start of next year. I think actually the past 2 years we've seen a balance in that account, and so you know, I think that's one reason why we committed more to staffing.
That makes sense, Greg. Thanks. And maybe the professional development direction could be something that could be taken up in curriculum and student development at some point.
Absolutely. Yeah. I do see Liz has joined us. Can you speak to the staffing piece on that? Thank you.
Yes. When we closed down Island Avenue, we did not end up we kept that school psychologist on. We changed from having a 0.6 school psychologist at TCLC to having a 1.0, and then we added a 0.6 school psychologist to the high school. The reason for the increase, I think they are both very important positions and have very important roles. At this time, we only have 3 social workers for the district. So we have one that is split between Jeffrey and Ryerson, one that is split between Brown and Polson, and then one at the high school. So it's when we have students who are having some emotional challenges, it's very challenging to have a staff who's not in the building every day. And so in order to be able to increase the supports that we can provide, the 2 additional social workers will now allow us to have 1 social worker in each of the buildings. And then we have 1 full-time school psychologist from TCLC all the way to Daniel Hand. And at Daniel Hand, we have 1.6 school psychologists.
Liz, can you tell me the total? Because that makes sense. So that's about 6 or 7 psychologists, is that right?
So yeah, there's 6.6. So at the high school, we have 1 full-time and 1 that is there 3 full days. But at this point, we only have, again, the 3 social workers for the entire district. And it's very, challenging when you have that mental health staff that is not in the building every day to support our students. So it's, in speaking with, in addition, speaking with, my mental health staff team, which includes school psychologists and social workers, they were all supportive of adding a social worker into each building, since we have a explaining that in each building.
Thank you for explaining that.
No problem. Yeah, I know. And I think with the closing of Island and being able to add that additional person, so we have recently added to having school psychologists. So now I feel it's time to add to our social workers.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you.
So the 1.6 school psychologists, you said there's 1 full-time at TCLC and the 0.6 is at Hand.
Yes.
And so then that person is not full-time?
Yes. So at Hand, we have 1 full-time and then 1.6, which is 3 days a week.
Okay. So it's the same person working more than? I'm sorry, I'm just not
So just
following you.
so when Island Ave closed, I had one in every school and then a 0.6 at the preschool, which we don't have a social worker at the preschool, and there is a huge need. So I moved the one from Island Ave to the preschool. So we have one full-time counseling staff there. And then I moved the 0.6 that had been placed at the preschool, but had also been doing some support from the high school, because as was brought up previously, testing is something that there's a lot of, especially at the high school level. So now we have the 1.6 at the high school.
And then we currently have 3 social workers, but they're split between Jeffrey, Ryerson, Brown, Polson, and Hand.
Yes, Hand has one there, but at Jeffrey and Ryerson, one person is split between the 2 schools and one split between Polson and Brown. So it's very hard when we're trying to help students when they need to put them with an individual who's not there every day. So it's very important that we have our mental health staff that is in the building every day to help to support our students.
Thank you.
All right, wait, one more point of clarification, sorry, but even though the social workers aren't there every day, there is a school psychologist in each building every day. And in Hand, there's 1.6. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. But again, it does become very challenging when students have needs and their go-to point person is not in the building.
We
And
do
especially,
we do have school counselors as well, though, in every building.
yep. And each student makes a different connection with a different individual.
So it's not as though the buildings aren't being serviced by social service personnel.
100%. But it's also especially in terms of thinking of an IEP. So when we're putting in counseling services, we determine who the best person is for that role, but to be able to use the social workers, and also to be able to, when we have someone with the social worker, that student then has access to that person every single school day instead of every other day, as it's not always predictable when a student is going to need to speak with somebody.
Thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so as we shared, there's nothing to act on for the board on the grants today, but in terms of the $100,000 reduction, we would ask that you vote on that later on the agenda. Okay, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cook. We've kind of folded in board member comments into the report, but if anybody has any further questions or comments or concerns, now would be the time to bring them up. Okay, hearing none, we'll give our audience a second chance to respond to any information presented. And Wendy, do we have any members of the public or attendees who have questions or would like to speak?
I don't see any hands raised, but why don't we give them just a second?
Okay. And while we're waiting, I'd just like to inform the board that our Board of Selectmen liaison, Scott Murphy, is not here tonight. So we will be skipping that agenda item.
So Galen, no one has raised their hand.
Okay, well, thank you. If anybody's out there and has a question, feel free to email the board and we'll get right on it. Thank you. Moving along to item number 8, the consent agenda. There are 2 exhibits for your consideration. The first consists of line item transfers as of March 31st, 2021. And the Second is a list of budgeted expenditures as of April 1st, 2021. We need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Greg.
Second, Emily.
Second, Emily. Thank you, Emily. Is there any discussion about the items? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No. Any abstentions? Motion carries 9-0. Thank you. And now we move on to our board committee reports, led off by Curriculum and Student Development, Diane, Dr. Infantine Weiss. It is all yours.
Someday you're going to get my name right.
I'm so sorry. I tried.
Okay. I kind of
It's
like
like
to
I
hear
have
it new every time.
You can mispronounce mine, and I won't take offense. But I had to get the doctor in there, So
That's fine. Okay,
right.
so we met on March 23rd, and give me 1 second here. So we had presentation by both of the elementary school principals. The first presentation was from Kelly Spooner about data teams and Tier 1 work, and she showed us how specifically data teams work with specific examples from Ryerson, and we focused on the Easy CBM results and those students that were flagged through that assessment as requiring more intervention at the Tier 1 level. And examples were given showing how the intervention is being approached. Students met in small groups working with various professionals, teachers, coaches, interventionists, and paraprofessionals with an all-hands-on-deck approach this year, deploying and utilizing all resources available. Focus was on small group sessions, the frequency of meeting, and the format for the meetings. Letter sound fluency, phoneme segmentation, passage reading fluency, and word reading fluency were discussed. Follow-up assessments and progress monitoring were also discussed. Then Becky Frost gave us a Tier 2, Tier 3 case study with an example from Jeffrey School. Monitoring progress and reevaluation was discussed, focusing on how the students responded to instruction and what is done when they do not respond. Then our Assistant Superintendent, Gail, gave a presentation regarding the staff development consultations about professional development, including the Wilson Foundations training, the videotaped Zoom training from Penny Kittle, a mini series from Dr. Ben Powers on word morphology, and planned math training sessions in May from Lindsay Ramos. And that was it. End of report.
Okay, thank you very much. That was excellent. Dr. Pellegrino with Communications, you are up.
Thank you. Communications Committee met this evening. We led off the agenda with a report from Zoe Ross, Communications Specialist. First, Zoe reported on some key metrics in the communications area, reported two very good findings. One with respect to surveys as an example. The survey response rate for two recent high school surveys was well above average. Two surveys cited had survey response rates of 91% and 94% respectively, which is an excellent rate. In general, for the email open rates amongst the various buildings, again, reported very high email open rate. People are opening and going through some of the emails. From the district, there's a 65% open rate. Hand has a 56% open rate. Ryerson has a 67% open rate. And in general, a strong open rate in general is considered around 23%. So all this by way of saying is that they're collecting metrics that are showing that people are accessing the information. The general comments from the committee were very appreciative and praiseworthy of the communications that are coming out from the building administrators as well as the district. Zoe also reported on the question of end of year communications. I think this has been covered a little bit in our discussions tonight. Mostly by way of saying is to let people know that first, the end of year information about graduations, testing, exams, events comes out from the building administrators directly, not from central office. With that said, central office does facilitate the communications and is available to answer any questions that families may have. Dr. Cook did note that particularly with events, they are still waiting on updates with COVID regulations to understand the scope and the nature of events. So there is some information that is still under the heading of TBD. But as was noted tonight, there will be some information forthcoming, certainly on the proms at least, which is good. Dr. Cook went on to note some discussions about the budget, which we discussed this now. The central office has developed a 2-page summary for the consumption of the public to take the public through the highlights of the budget, which will be helpful. That 2-page summary will also be provided to the board and will be distributed on social media. And we also talked about the upcoming building project, and assuming a referendum date of November, we walked backwards from November to talk about a timeline for using various communication strategies to get information out. Dr. Cook is already currently utilizing various meetings and events to get information out about the buildings. It was suggested that we look at maybe doing a public forum early September and utilizing a frequently asked question sheet for the community, because we can anticipate some of the questions that are coming out about the building project as a standalone, and also in relation to our last referendum when people are comparing and contrasting what happened between the two. So central office is working on that. And there was no old business or new business or public comment, and that is the end of the report.
Great, thank you, Tom. I was remiss in not including a discussion period after Diane's report. So we can, if anybody has questions or concerns or comments about curriculum, please feel free to bring it up now. And then we can also have a discussion about what Tom covered in his committee. Awkward pause. No, just teasing. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks again, Tom. Hearing none, we'll move to the next item, which is Facilities Committee.
The Facilities Committee has not met. We're meeting next on April 20th.
Great. Thank you. All right. I'll have to ask my parliamentarian here to be punctilious. No report, no discussion. Right. Great. Okay. Thank you. Finance.
No report.
Thank you, Katie, and happy birthday. Personnel Committee.
We have not met. I have no report.
Thank you, Dr. McNerney. And now I suspect, well, I'm not sure. We have policy with Happy.
Okay, we have not met, but we do have several third readings and several first readings, and also several policies to vote on this evening. So third readings, it's policy 1380. Oh, sorry, bedtime here. Policy 2240, policy 2280, policy 2300, policy 4119, policy 5120.4.2.5, policy 5131.911, policy 5131.914. Those are all in your packet, and you've seen them before. We've discussed them. And then tonight we have the first reading on 5 policies in the 2000 series that we are rescinding. So it's policy 2000 for administration concept and roles in administration, 2120 for administration organization chart, 2131 for superintendent of schools, 2210 for administrative leeway in absence of Board of Education policy, and 2220 for administration representatives and deliberative groups. And then further on in the agenda, we have a motion item to vote on several policies. I don't know if I need to read those, but I don't think I do, because they'll be read at the time of the motion. End of report.
Okay, thank you, Happy. Is there any discussion on what Happy covered?
I have a question. I should know
thank you.
this, but I wasn't in attendance. The policies that are being rescinded, why is that? Are those Mooney purpose, for Mooney's purpose?
Yes, they reviewed them and they recommended that we rescind them. Either they're covered elsewhere or we don't need them.
Thank you. That's what I thought.
Thank you. Next, we move on to the Learn Liaison. Katie, have you met with those folks?
No, we meet on Thursday. No report.
All right. Thank you. Next up is an action item. We need a motion to approve the minutes of the March 16th, 2021 Board of Education meeting.
So moved.
All right. Thank you, Greg.
Second, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. Discussion? Okay. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Violet abstain. Motion carries. Eight in favor. All right. Next up is a motion to approve the revised 2021-2022 budget. I'll read it. I'll read the amount first, and then we will get a motion. The revised 2021-22 budget is in the amount of $59,272,037. This reflects a change from a 1.40 increase to a 1.23% increase. Do we have a motion for this?
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Second?
Second, Tom.
Okay, thank you, Tom. So the motion again is to approve the revised 2021-22 budget in the amount of $59,272,037, reflecting a 1.40% increase to a 1.23% increase. Is there a discussion on this topic or in this motion?
I just wanted to,
Diane?
No, go ahead, Greg.
I just wanted to clarify, because I know we were discussing them all together, and for anybody viewing this, and Craig, you can probably confirm, but all we're voting on here is what's contained in the budget. What we are not voting on is what was contained in the grant funding item list. So that might have been confusing earlier. So I just wanted to make sure we were clear.
Thank you. Thank you. Diane?
Thank you for that clarification, Greg, because I was going to ask something about that. But I do want to say that I think that we could have further reduced the budget. I'm glad to see that we reduced it somewhat, thanks to the Board of Finance. But I do think that it could be reduced more. I think the grant could cover the math interventionists at hand. And it could cover technology support specialists. I just think that our budget last year was leaner than this, and it was pre-COVID. And I think looking at our town, our current economy, I think we should have done better.
Okay, thank you.
I just would like to say I wholeheartedly disagree with Diane. I feel like our budget last year was a lot lower because we closed a school. We have contractual obligations that we have to adhere to, and I feel strongly that our programmatic needs are not only need to be addressed, but need to be improved in terms of the COVID response, as well as responses to declining test scores and learning loss and things like that. So I think we just have a intellectual difference in how we approach it. But I think that we at 1.4%, when we have contractual obligations that far exceed that, that we have done a really good job.
I think so.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Katie.
I just want to say something as well. So I'm pleased that we were able to reduce somewhat. I know we've had differences of opinion amongst the board. I want to say that I do feel like some board members' sense of fiscal responsibility is part of what we feel that we were elected to do. And then what other board members make comments that indicate that for some reason people who are fiscally responsible don't support the administration or the schools, I think that's disrespectful of your fellow board members. So I think it is just a difference of opinion on how we're approaching this. And I hope that everybody will continue to be respectful and that nobody should in any way imply that any of these board members are not supportive of the schools or the administration or the students.
Very happy, and that is why I did not post to Facebook about our disagreements in terms of how we approach the budget.
I also feel that it's very important to get accurate information out there instead and not try to manipulate people into supporting things.
All right. Thank you for the comments. We can, if everybody has said what they'd like, we can put this to a vote. All in favor of the motion as stated? Aye. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay. Thank you. And any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. All right. We have the next action item is a motion to approve a number of policies. Actually, we have two different, the first is a bundle of several policies. The second is separate, but if anybody wants to split it off and vote on it separately, I think they can raise that issue. The action item is a motion to approve the following policies, and these are number 2240, retention of electronic records and information. I will just read the first part of this because they're rather long. Policy number 2300 holds on the destruction of electronic information and paper records. Policy number 4119, reports of suspected abuse or neglect of children or reports of sexual assault of students by school employees. Policy number 5120, .4.2.5, procedures for reporting child sexual abuse and sexual assault. Policy number 5131.911, bullying prevention and intervention. And policy number 5131.914, safe school climate policy. Do we have a motion to approve the following policies or the previously mentioned policies?
One, did you mention 1380?
1380 is, thank you. 1380, I think, is the next on the list, Violet. It's indicated separately as an action item.
It's also third reading though, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
If I'm mistaken on that.
Okay.
But I think that's third reading. Thank you.
So moved.
All right, thank you, Greg. Do we have a second? Thank you,
Diane.
Violet. Oops, next time, Diane. Violet got there. Is there any discussion on these policy?
Just to clarify, the reason the other one is posted separately is because we want to make sure that we're approving and rescinding in the same motion, because you don't want to have both of those policies out there at the same time because they're contradictory. That's why.
Great, thank you, Happy. Great point.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right. The next item is a motion to approve policy number 1380, sexual offenders on school property, and also to rescind policy number 2270, the sex offender notification, as noted by Happy. Can I have a motion on that?
So moved, Diane.
Okay, thank you, Diane. Second. Thank you, Violet. And I think just got a text from Kathy stating that her computer died and she is on her way back in. So perhaps we can discuss it just a bit to let her back in to have the chance to vote. or just wait 30 seconds.
Katie, say something so we can see if we can hear you.
Okay, she's back in.
All right. Thank you, Wendy.
You're welcome.
So Kathy, we just had a motion to approve policy number 1380, sexual offenders and school property, and also to rescind policy number 2270, the sex offender notification. This motion was made by Diane and seconded by Violet. We've just concluded discussion. If you'd like to say something. Okay, thank you. So let's call this to a vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Would anybody like to include or ask about future agenda items? All right, you're always welcome to email them to the executive committee. Thank you. Meetings and dates of importance are noted in the back of your packet. And the next item on our agenda is will be a motion to enter into executive session. I'd like to state to the members of the public that we will, if this motion is successful, we'll enter into executive session and then return to the regular session for possible voting, followed by adjournment. So we need a motion to enter into executive session and to also invite Dr. Craig Cook, superintendent, to discuss the following. To discuss the contract of central office administrator. The board may take action upon exiting executive session. And secondly, to discuss the contract of employment for 2 employees to not be renewed for the following year based on reduction in force upon its expiration at the end of the 2021 school year. And that the superintendent of schools is directed to advise such persons in writing of this action. Do we have a motion?
So move.
Thanks, Greg. Second. Okay, thank you, Tom. We will now enter into executive session.
And so for the public and the reminder for the board, you have a link specifically for executive session sent to you from Wendy. So this meeting link will stay open. Board members should close out of it and then go into the executive session link.
Thank you.
Violet, do you have the email with the link for the executive session? You're muted.
I'm trying to get it, but I can't seem to get out of this into my emails. I'm not sure why my computer isn't doing this.
So you want to, you want to leave this meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Katie, are you there also?
Oh, here we go. I'm out. Okay, so I'm going to leave this. I think I'm going to have to get out. So.
Yep. How about you, Katie?
Wendy? Wendy?
I'm here.
Why am I the only one here?
I don't know. I just resent you the email for the executive that has the executive committee link.
All right, let me check. Let me check right now.
Okay.
Wendy, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, so I'm in my meetings right now.
So Katie, so go to your email, your Madison email.
Yep.
Okay. You should have right at the top an email that I sent you probably less than 5 minutes ago.
Okay.
It has the board, the package attached to it, the communications.
9. All right. I have something at 9. So it has the package, but it doesn't have a link.
Yes, it does. If you move, so open up the email
okay,
and
I
move
got it.
down.
All right, let me try that.
Okay.
Does that need a meeting ID though?
No, it's different because just click on it. You should be able to get in. It's just for executive session.
Just click on join.
Mm-hmm.
So it says I need a meeting
But-
ID.
No. For executive session, no. Are you on the link for executive session? There's 3 links. There's one for the communications, one for the regular meeting, and one for the executive committee meeting.
So it says join the webinar. Join the webinar, Board of Education meeting, communications, executive session. All right, let me try that. Launch meeting.
You have to leave this meeting. Okay, you got it.
Wendy?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay. You see we got some board members and attendees.
Yep, I'm
Thank-
putting them in right now.
I thought you probably were. Oh, there it goes. Thank you.
No problem. Let's see. Copy. Okay, looks like everybody's in.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We've returned to the regular session.
We have Emily.
Oh, we have Emily. Thank you.
She's in the participants area. Somebody could promote her.
Yes.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. Okay, thank you, everyone. I need a motion to approve a new contract for the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment to be effective July 1st, 2021 through and including June 30th, 2024, salary to be adjusted accordingly. Would anyone like to make that motion? Okay, Katie, thank you. Second?
Second.
Second, Tom. Thank you. Is there any discussion about the motion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Okay, so let's hold up. All right, thank you. All opposed? Okay, thank you. Any abstentions? And I see Violet's hand is up. Thank you. Okay. By my count, motion passes 5-3 with 1 abstention. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Second item, we need a motion that the contract for employment of, and Craig, let me just make sure I'm allowed to say the names here.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Need a motion that the contract for employment for Danielle Wandel and Jonathan Garcia not be renewed for the following year based on a reduction in force upon its expiration at the end of the 2021 school year, and that the superintendent of schools is directed to advise such persons in writing of this action. Is there any discussion about this motion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Do we have a motion in a second? Kim?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's late. I am so sorry. This is on automatic pilot. Thank you, Greg. Do we have a motion
So moved.
for this? Thank you, Greg. Second?
Second, Tom.
All right. I think I'll give this. Thank you. All right. Any discussion? All right. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right. Finally, thank you all for your patience. We need a motion to adjourn.
So moved,
Katie?
Diane.
All right, Diane, thank you. This meeting is now adjourned at 10:40 p.m. Thank you very much.